call the Raleigh Transit Authority meeting to order for Thursday, February 13th at 3:33 p.m.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to like that.
Yes, I do. Good afternoon. How are you all? All right, we're going to go ahead and do roll call for the record, starting here.
Morris Cook.
Sharita McCullers.
Nathan Spencer.
Tallulah Payam-Wakaye.
Daniel Coleman.
Michael Stevenson.
Chris Jones.
Joshua Gill.
And David Eatman.
Thank you. Okay, are there any revisions or additions to the agenda from the authority?
Just the spelling of my last name.
I have one revision. Can we go ahead and talk about, how do I want to put it? I guess the issue at hand that's been going, that we were dealing with. Let's go ahead and get into the BRT and the Wake County Public Transit Plan. We'll put that at the top of the agenda. All right.
Okay.
So, today, well, last week sometime, there seemed to be a pressing issue that some of the authority members were working on in secrecy. So I want to let Nathan and Michael speak to whatever it is that they felt was very important, that they not include it in the open discussion or the chair.
I'm happy to discuss it.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, we have to approve the minutes, right?
Sorry.
Let's just get that out the way.
Move approval on the minutes.
Second. It's been moved and properly seconded. All opposed, say nay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the minutes from the January 9th Transit Authority meeting. Okay, jumping into it.
Want me to go? Yes. I don't agree with the characterization of secrecy. I did have a notion that I was thinking about, and I did discuss it with two people. It was simply that we're entering an election season, and county, state, and federal levels. And it crossed my mind, would we want to make some sort of affirmation or resolution of our support for the Wake County Transit Plan? And I did discuss it with two people. And it was certainly intention to bring that discussion here, to socialize it. If it's something that people thought had merit, and how we might approach it, what kind of wording we might want to adopt. But it's really a discussion item, and it would be a consensus document. If people felt that it's something to take forward, we could talk about it, but it's nothing that we have to do either. So that's pretty much it.
What's Nathan got to say?
Yeah, Nathan?
I talked to Sharita, actually, because I thought the issue of jobs and drivers needed to be included in that. So I wanted to get her on board on that and get her take. And that was the extent of my piece of that. I wasn't even writing the document. So we were preparing this, and I say we in terms of the idea as an idea that we could talk about at the table. Because as Michael said, this is something that voters approved, and there's a election season going on, and we wanted to make sure that we affirm that, especially in the federal politics that's going on, and the need for help from the federal side. It's a message that needs to be said.
Okay, was Sharita the only person that you spoke to about this?
I
The only
spoke.
person you contacted or spoke to about this?
I had mentioned it to Brian Burnett as well when I talked to him about other pieces, and I did mention it to Mr. Jones when he and I sat down, and I took him through my take of what the Transit Authority's abilities and reach are after sending him the starter pack on all those things. I'm sorry, I sent that to Joshua Gill. I did not send that to Chris, but sending him some resources on what what the what all the system is, all those different pieces, including the Wake Transit Plan, what authority the Transit Authority has. Let's see. The starter pack is basically everything that we do in transit, everything that's going on, and how the last few years. So.
Okay. So my understanding is that that Michael had an idea of putting together a proclamation for the Transit Authority to show their support for the Wake County Transit Plan. You and Karen agreed that that was a good idea. Michael proceeded to write the proclamation. You proceeded to call people to gather votes for that proclamation today. It wasn't just conversations you were having with people. You were trying to get people to side with whatever it is that you all were writing up to support the Wake County Transit Plan, not just conversations. And then the information you were giving people was vague to the point of we just need to move transit forward. So that's more than what you all are saying. You all were actually just doing very innocently. And it gives us an opportunity to talk about the Wake County Transit Plan in this space. So to your point about the voter-approved transit plan and the voter-approved initiatives, it's no secret that I am not for the Wake County Transit Plan as written. It's no secret that I am not for the BRT going down New Bern Avenue as the initial corridor for the BRT. I will be forthcoming and transparent that I made a comment, and I've been doing my due diligence as a citizen of this city, of Raleigh, North Carolina, and making sure that also as a resident of District C, also as a person who lives not far off New Bern Avenue, to see what we can do to make sure that this plan is equitable for everyone. In that voter-approved approach for the transit that you were mentioning down New Bern Avenue, the ballot that we voted on in the last election before this last one that approved the BRT down New Bern Avenue had extremely vague language.
Madam Chair, what election? Was that election by the Board of Elections? Or
No, it was an election for City Council.
that was on the ballot?
Yeah, City Council was on that ballot of that particular election.
No, transit wasn't on
New
there.
Bern, New Bern Ave.
The
was-
New Bern Avenue corridor was mentioned on the transit. It was something for the people to vote on. And the wording of that,
In which election?
what's the election? That was just the last one that he was elected.
City Council.
City Council, not this past City Council, but the last one.
There was
Not
a
just last year.
There was a transportation bond, but it had nothing to do with New Bern Ave's
So the
BRT.
transportation bond
But it
spoke
has-
about.
That did not do anything with
spoke
BRT.
about, but the transportation bond spoke about complete transportation. It wasn't specifically focused on New Bern Avenue BRT. It spoke about the transit plan, and the transit plan includes this. And in the transit plan, it asked if people were for enhanced transportation, and of course, people are gonna vote for better public transportation. That just makes sense, right? But oftentimes, people don't know how that's actually going to affect them, and I'll go ahead and admit that we, as the RTA, have been very focused solely on transit and not thinking about how all the pieces work together. The methods used, so let's start with my piece on this. I've said the word gentrification multiple times, and I think a lot of people are tone deaf to it and feel like it's not a big deal. But oftentimes, gentrification precedes transportation, and I will send you all some information in regards to that. It's happened in Chicago. It's happened in New York. It has happened in Los Angeles. It's happening here in North Carolina, where new and enhanced transportation like this bus rapid transit tends to be preceded by development. In a city council meeting, I listened to the developer, I listened to them talk about the affordable housing bond referendum and how 10% of that affordable housing bond referendum was going to go to developers for development assistance. And then I watched the developers get up and say that they were going to follow the path of the BRT for development. That path initially is up New Bern Avenue. So my question, before I go further, is why New Bern Avenue? Why is New Bern Avenue the initial corridor for the BRT?
before we pursue this further, which I agree is a worthy discussion, I just want to go back to the issue of where this started. Nathan nor Karen or anybody else had the idea of drafting a statement. It was my idea. Nothing has been drafted. So I just wanted that to be out in the open. My intent was to talk about it and bring it to this board for discussion, whether it was something worth pursuing or not. So just want to make that statement, then we can continue on the larger discussion.
Well, I do remember in our conversation, you said that you were going to work to write it. And even if you had not drafted it, whether you were going to do it before I sent out the email asking that all action be stopped and brought to open discussion at the Transit Authority or not, Nathan, on your part, or whoever part he was playing, decided to pick people off to figure out if he can get enough people to vote for what it was that you all wanted to do before bringing it to the Transit Authority. So if it's a discussion that needs to be had with the whole Transit Authority that we're getting votes on, which Nathan was attempting to do, then that should be a discussion that's brought to open conversation and not an offline discussion that you're then trying to source votes for.
May I speak?
Yes, please.
A lot of this runs, if you remember the meeting we had, the subcommittee, where when we got into the idea of a meeting and what was, how many people did have to be in a meeting for it to be lawful, and so forth and so on. And we, you know, that was a touchy issue when we were discussing it whenever last week.
And the policies.
And the policies attached to it. So that needs to be, which we didn't, is still shelved right now for a later meeting. And, but I just want to say this one thing, because I'm ready to talk about BRT. I've got my little stuff ready for it. But I see it's in the agenda also. But I want to get to the issue. And I thought that the RTA had already had a vote on Wake Transit Plan as a group. Did we vote it up or down?
We voted on the Wake Transit Plan and different pieces of it many times. In fact, we voted on New Bern Ave many times.
So I don't know. The question has to be the BRT, and the issue is the BRT. And I think with the release from the Federal Transit Administration's ranking, and if you took the time to read the ranking, all the ranking data, this on the page, the page on dealing with project feasibility is just interesting, you know. But I don't know where we're going to sit and talk about that today. But the project feasibility begs the questions that Tolulope is talking about. And I'm going to tell you, I went to a meeting this week at Grace AME, put together by Octavia Rainey, and there was Marcus Kinraid from the Wake County Revenue. Dave Ellis was there, you know, all the people out of Revenue. And this is one of the stories somebody came and told us. There was a man out in his yard on New Bern Avenue cutting his grass. He didn't have any legs. And his sister, he doesn't have power. His sister has his power of attorney. And somebody came up there to him and said, did you want to sell your house? And the story goes, he said no. So whoever this person was said, well, I need you to sign this document so to say that I did talk to you. So when I go back to the office, I can verify that I talked to you. Lo and behold, what he had this person sign was an offer to purchase. And he wrote him a $10 check. And but for this gentleman signing that $10 check, and it still took some legal wrangling to get this thing off. Then later on this week, somebody called me about what I want to sell. And they were very aggressive. I immediately took his number, sent it to Josh Stein, the Attorney General's office, and said, we have now unleashed what I want to call predatory solicitation along New Bern Avenue in the Southeast Raleigh area, coupled with the extreme real estate reevaluations that the property along the corridor has experienced because of the 2020 reevaluations. So when you mix all that in to the federal, and the only people that really can evaluate us are the people we're soliciting money from, which would be the Federal Transit Administration. And when they send us a report, and it says that our mobility improvement ratings are low, Our congestion relief ratings are medium-low. Our economic ratings is medium-low.
Have you compared any of these to other projects?
I'm not comparing anything, because this is the report card.
I understand that, but if I get a report card that says, look at
These are the ones
look
that
at my
count.
son's school, for example. My
I'm
son's
sorry, Nathan, let me finish what I have to say, and then you can say whatever you want to. Now, David hasn't been here long enough to know, but let me just say, because DeLupe asked the question, why New Bern Avenue? And I've been giving this a lot of thought. When we were doing light rail, every time we got kicked back was because of ridership. David, you weren't here, maybe you were here, I can't remember. But in the 90s and early 2000s, it was because of ridership. Our existing, we did not have a transit savvy market here. I think New Bern Avenue was submitted was because it was the only transportation corridor we had that had ridership numbers that supported the idea that we might be a transit savvy market. Other than that, if you looked at Capitol, if you looked at New Bern, if you looked at South Wilmington Street, the ridership numbers there were an abomination. You already been down that route. We didn't have the numbers. So I think that's why I went there. But all I'm saying to support, ladies and gentlemen, what is happening in the market along the New Bern Avenue corridor demands our attention. And if we are not achieving the mobility ratings that the people that are evaluating whether we get any money or not, they're the ones that, I didn't make this, is not Daniel Coleman making this observation. This is right straight from the Federal Transit Administration, the report that was released whatever day that David came to whatever the day y'all had that thing, because that's when I looked it up. And it's saying these things. I think that we should be, if we're not, I'm not employed by a transportation agency. I don't think any of you guys are, except for Morris and Sharita, that one's a driver and one's a.
But a couple of us may be employed by agencies that benefit from the BRT. being put on New Bern Avenue.
yeah, but what's this BRT? 150, 200 million, 300 million for down New Bern Avenue?
The New Bern Avenue project within the document that you have is listed at 71.5 million.
But that's our half, and the government is going to.
That is the total project cost.
The total project.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, now I'm confused, because in our budget the other day that we looked at, I thought that the city was taking 71 million out of the Go Triangle pot of money, the sales tax money. So what was that? That 71 million was.
That was a total project cost. If you saw 71.5, that would
Where's
have
that
been
coming from?
The 71.5 is approximately 50% federal and 50% local funding.
So we're asking for 35 from the feds and 35 from Wake.
Roughly, it gets there are some other sources in there because of existing funding sources that are local that were accounted for, but generally it is 50-50.
But there are a lot of people along the corridor that are not benefiting from this, and there's a lot of dishevelment. So
So to the point that I was making is that some of our most vulnerable citizens live up the New Bern Avenue corridor and the adjoining streets and the adjacent streets to New Bern Avenue. We understand with any measure of research, if anybody cared to do it, that gentrification doesn't stay just on the one street that is gentrified, it radiates out. The area of New Bern Avenue that we're talking about developing is from Tarboro to Sunnybrook. But we're not developing anywhere from Moore Square up where $1 million homes are, so we're protecting them.
There is construction that will occur between Blunt Street and Tarboro Road on New Bern Avenue. The curb lines will change.
The curb lines.
The curb lines will change between Raleigh Boulevard and Sunnybrook because there are none. Mm-hmm. So we'll be installing curb and gutter.
Right.
But the curb lines would change on New Bern Avenue on the south side between Blunt Street and Tarboro.
And the bulk of the development that we talked about was New Bern to Sunnybrook. Is that correct? Because that's what we've been discussing, unless we're saying something different today. From Tarboro to Sunnybrook. The bulk of our development is what we've been discussing, Tarboro to Sunnybrook.
The bulk, I'm not sure what you mean by development.
Development, I'm sure you do know what I mean. So with that, From Tarboro,
Development of the, I'm just saying, are you talking about development as in commercial development as in right-of-way development
right-of-way
with curb and
development,
gutter?
because commercial development is following. So I understand
Okay.
that we don't control commercial development, right?
That is
So
correct.
then I'm not referring to commercial
Okay.
development.
My apologies.
No problem, then I'm referring to us. So we're developing from Tarboro to Sunnybrook. From Tarboro to Raleigh Boulevard are a lot of black businesses. From Raleigh Boulevard to Sunnybrook are black renters and homes. And from those streets that are adjacent along Raleigh Boulevard to Sunnybrook are a lot of other people who are some of our most vulnerable citizens. An area that needs development would be up past Tower Shopping Center. So the fact that we're not doing any development where development is actually needed, but choosing to do development and having developers come to city council meetings saying that they're gonna follow the path of the BRT. They said that out of their mouth, I heard it. I'm sure if we pull up the meeting, it's on record. The point is this, I can show you documentation, I'll send this out to the rest of the authority, of how this actually winds up affecting citizens in the long run with us putting the BRT up there and us having to eventually move people out that currently live there. We understand that that's gonna be the next step of this. It will actually hurt our ridership in the long run. The BRT is to increase ridership, correct? The point of the BRT is to increase ridership.
A reliable, frequent network is designed to increase ridership,
Thank you.
yes.
So the BRT is to increase ridership. So if we're using the BRT to increase ridership, but in the long run, move out the people who actually ride our buses, then what are we actually gonna do? And I'm asking why New Bern Avenue, because when we think about Capitol Boulevard, which is in need of development and actually in need of enhanced transportation, we're not putting it there. That actually could sustain.
We are putting it
We're
on.
not putting it there initially. Please stop trying to mince and pick apart my words to make your point. We're not putting it up Capitol Boulevard initially. We're forcing it up New Bern Avenue without realizing or identifying what equitable development around transit actually looks like. We've put together some EDAT, and every time we ask people, well, what is gonna happen with development, the answer is often, I don't know, we're trying to figure it out. So we'll move these people out and use New Bern Avenue as a guinea pig space to figure out how equitable development will affect people while affecting our most vulnerable people. We can move it up Western, which also could sustain some development. And if we're talking about increasing our ridership, we could use students to increase ridership without moving anybody out. And most of the students and renters tend to transition out of that area because they're renting for them being in college. So my question again is, why New Bern Avenue?
May I comment on
Sure, if you want.
some of this?
Are you gonna come in and answer why New Bern Avenue? Is that
No,
be a
I'm
part
going
of the answer?
to answer some of the things that have been tossed,
Can we ask-
particularly at me so
Okay,
far.
I definitely feel like you have the right to respond, but I would like my question answered first. Why New Bern Avenue? Whoever has the answer to why New Bern Avenue is the corridor that we're using to put the BRT up first.
I'll be happy to provide a staff response. I didn't know if you were looking for a board response or from
Well,
a
the
staff
board
response.
supports it, so those of you who support this, Karen, Nathan, Michael, Morris, I don't know if you support it or not, but who knows, or the people for the first answer I'm wanting from the authority who supports the new, I know that Karen keeps saying, we've been spent so much time on this, but just because you spent a lot of time making a poor decision doesn't mean you should keep making that poor decision. And the time spent on putting it up New Bern should not be the reason that we keep doing this. So why New Bern Avenue?
I don't mean to be interrupting you. I apologize. From a board standpoint, and I'm only speaking for me because as we all know, we only speak on our own unless there's a vote specifically on that fact. But speaking for myself, my understanding was that in multiple documents that have done studies on stakeholder views and speaking to the community throughout, that New Bern had requested initial movement on this and on any transit. My other understanding on some of this was that there was a immediate need to connect people with opportunity and jobs in a way that was providing faster, more accessible service. Currently, I live in East Raleigh, and currently getting to jobs anywhere outside of downtown takes quite a bit of time. So having the ability to get faster service either to downtown or further from New Bern out to other areas and creating transfer centers and stuff like that, which the Wake Transit Plan is a network, and looking at just one piece of it in a microscope, you can draw a lot of things like you could any story by putting, like Danny's doing with looking at one little piece of something. You don't get a full picture, but as a network, it provides a way for more access to jobs.
As any corridor would do, right? As it would up Capitol, as it would up.
Oh,
Western,
absolutely,
right?
but there's
So then that's not a
many fewer
justification.
there's many few, you asked me a question, I'm trying to answer that. There's many fewer residents along Capitol and South. Even with Western, there's a lot of students, but there's fewer opportunity to actually connect people. In terms of a quarter mile, which is the measurement of people along who would walk to a stop, which is the FTA's measurement of where ridership would source from, New Bern Ave has the largest ridership
It does.
area.
I agree.
And so therefore it makes great sense that if you're looking at who are we going to help the most in terms of ridership, that makes sense.
So if we're saying who are we going to help the most in terms of ridership, as I said, our ridership right now are low-income people of color who live on New Bern Avenue, who are currently at this point increasingly unable to afford their homes, unable to afford rent, with multi-million-dollar homes being built next to homes that are not valued at that much and then having to sell because their property taxes are increasing, then wouldn't that mean that our ridership currently that we're using to help get to jobs will eventually be moved out in the long run? That large ridership on New Bern Avenue that we're talking about helping, but while we're saying we're helping them get moved out. Currently, we have a massive housing crisis here in Raleigh,
Along New Bern Avenue.
period, across the city, but definitely along New Bern Avenue. We have homeless hotels where people are now moving because they can't afford to rent anywhere, because their house has been taken from them, snatched from them, because where they were renting was sold to developers. Maybe their credit isn't the best. That's our ridership we're talking about helping. So now they're living in hotels. Now their children are being dropped off. You ride up at any time after school is let out, you'll see school buses dropping kids off at hotels. Those
Madam-
hotels are causing an increase. I'm not done. The hotels are causing an increase. Now those homeless hotels are causing increases in crime and violence. So not only are we putting more pressure on the housing crisis that we have in this area, we're also causing other issues like crime, because we're forcing people to have to move. And I'm not sure if you all are not, and I'm not sure if anybody is not noticing that, or if that's a piece that we don't care about, because we only care about transit, even though transit is affecting this. So I'm trying to figure out if we move these people off New Bern, they're already having housing insecurities, then we lose our ridership in the long run. The ridership we're talking about helping, that large group that live up New Bern, those low-income people that ride the bus, in favor of a space where we have more people moving in who are transients, and they're very car-centric. So us putting this BRT does not guarantee an increase in ridership. If anything, it will cause a decrease in ridership. And we're moving people who have had homes in this area for generations in favor of people who are gonna move here for maybe 5 to 10 years and move somewhere else, because that's the pace. We've seen it again happen in San Diego. It's happened in New York. It's happening here. I'm sure you all have seen those box homes that are going up, and they cost a lot of money in communities that have not had houses that expensive in the area before, which is then causing an increase in their property taxes, which is then causing predatory people to come and try to move people out their houses, and these are developers who have said they're gonna follow the path of the BRT. Now, in Nathan's words, he's basically, when I'm saying, well, why not capital, he sounds like it doesn't need to go up capital. But we're talking about doing studies to send the BRT up capital. When you said, but you just said,
I
if
don't
I'm
like that
asking,
you're
if
putting
I'm-
words into my mouth. I was not saying
You
that.
basically said that capital is not the necessary first place to put it because
That is
it's
not
not
at
very
all.
residential. It's not very residential.
Can I have a point of order?
Sure.
That is not at all what I
Okay,
said.
what did you say, Nathan?
I said that the most ridership numbers for, if you're looking at this from a perspective of helping people, as this being aid, that would be the first stop, first corridor. Now, I don't disagree with you that there's a lot of issues here. There are a lot of issues that that need to be taken care of. And if you've looked through the presentation that the EDAT presentation, Danny's talking about the predatory piece. That needs to be a part of it. It is a function that they're mentioning, the small business assistance. I've spoken to 3 business owners along the way because I live on not far from New Bern Ave, and I patronize those businesses. I get my dry cleaning along there. I speak to the owners along there, and they're looking forward to assistance. They're hoping to have some help. These are things that need to happen. I don't disagree with you at all. What I don't see is why are we not focusing on trying to find a solution to it rather than leaving the community to fend on its own while going and focusing on Western, South, or Capital? Because this is an opportunity, but this goes around transit. So if there's no transit going there, then we need to
do have
start a
transit there,
study.
right?
We won't have the transit. Apparently we don't have the ridership. We're pushing the ridership out. So
Of New
therefore,
Bern is what you're saying, right?
of New Bern.
Okay.
So therefore, if we push the ridership out, then there won't be any need for the larger, more opportunity for housing assistance, rehab assistance, property tax relief, stuff like that.
Circling the drain with that argument. You really are. The people that have been here for a minute, you're really circling the drain.
I
I'm trying to
apologize.
think, because you mentioned why it wasn't going up Capital, and then you mentioned why it wasn't going up Western, which basically poses the point that there's no justification in it going up Capital or Western.
I can provide a staff perspective if you would like.
Okay.
So certainly, when the Wake Transit Plan was developed, it developed its corridors based on transit propensity. Transit propensity is based on density and a number of demographic factors. Certainly, low income and households with one vehicle or no vehicle actually drive that number up. So when you get those densities and those other propensity factors, you can see where higher ridership areas exist. Certainly, all 4 corridors followed areas which had, existing transit ridership as well as projected propensity. I don't deny, obviously, the things that you're saying, the equitable development around transits, looking at all of those elements. We know that with or without transit, there's just so many pressures that are coming. So that aside, that's given. That's just a reality. But the 4 corridors, so that's how the based Wake Transit Plan, along with all of the services that were really provided or developed for Wake County, were developed. So it was looking at long existing as well as projections for development and how can we move people to jobs, and certainly the existence of jobs in residential to those was a big driving factor as well. So that's kind of the baseline. 3 of those corridors, really around the transit plan timeframe, had existing corridor studies. All 3 except for Western Boulevard had a corridor study. So as we started thinking about, we were very fortunate for the Wake Transit Plan to be funded, and so we're moving forward those elements. And as you stated, we had to figure out, what do we do? How do we implement these corridors? It's a very aggressive schedule that we would like to get all of these corridors completed by 2027. So again, 3 of those corridors had existing corridor plans. They had looked at existing land use as well as potential future land. When you think about those 3, also as we moved out of the Wake Transit Plan and got into the MIS study, All three of the four corridors had multiple corridors defined. So that means there were multiple alternatives for those corridors. Newbern, having a one-way pair with Newbern, Edenton, and then Newbern from basically Raleigh Boulevard out to Sunnybrook, just being Newbern Avenue, did not have any parallel corridors to study. We knew that the only way that there would not be, or the only opportunity for an alternative on Newbern was if you turned one of the one-way pairs into two-way. So you would have a counterflow on a one-way with a bus, or you would actually turn both corridors into two-way. And certainly that fell out very quickly in the preliminary planning and the MIS study at the end of the MIS study. The other three corridors still had very viable alternatives, and not just one or two. I mean, the southern corridor has 5 total alternatives that we'll have to look at and that we're currently looking at right now to try to figure out where do we put the BRT and where do we actually design and start coming up with budget estimates. So again, from a planning standpoint, we planned all 4 corridors to be completed by 2027. That's what our ultimate goal is. From an implementation standpoint, we had to break those corridors out into what is feasibly possible for us to implement within that time frame. Again, Newbern came out of that fairly quickly, had existing right-of-way, and there were no alternative alignments. As we brought that forward for the bodies to adopt and to consider, it was at that time approved by this body as well as council, and so we proceeded with our development of the corridor. Certainly that's a staff perspective of where we are and why we're here, but I did want to bring forward that perspective.
And I appreciate you bringing up that we voted on that.
Madam Chair, may I please have an opportunity to speak? Because you
Yes.
th me off before, thank you.
I was talking, you tried to jump in, so go ahead now.
Also because you had made some comments
Thank
about
you.
some comments I had
Carry
made.
on.
The reason, from my perspective, why this entire BRT project is so important and why Newbern Avenue first has everything to do with the fact that we are growing really fast as a region and as a city, and even more importantly, about economic opportunity. There have been many studies that have pointed to the fact that we already know statistically that the second highest expense for homes is transportation. And one of the best ways people have to have opportunity and access to multiple jobs is through frequent and reliable public transit, something that this city has never had. And I cannot imagine if we are moving forward with a major economic development opportunity project with public money that we would ignore a community that is among the poorest in the city. Also, when the voters voted for the funding for the Wake Transit Plan, of which the BRT is a very important part, the precincts that voted the highest in the entire county were in Southeast Raleigh.
Thank you.
And the Wake Transit Plan and the funding referendum for it was endorsed by significant long-term African-American organizations in this community. So for the city to ignore those things, I think would be, and could certainly be seen as ignoring the African-American community in this region. And those are other perspectives in addition to the information that David Eatman explained about why Newbern Avenue was ready practically first than the other corridors. But at the end of the day, these are all things that we need to do for the entire city to address growth, to address economic development and economic opportunity and access to jobs. And and those are the comments that I think I have made. It has nothing to do with the fact that how long we've been talking about this.
You did say that.
And finally, in my long-term experience of paying attention to what's going on in Raleigh and the city and the politics of Raleigh and the public policy of Raleigh, there has never been a time that more people have been paying attention to affordable housing and the crisis we face. And these issues are inextricably linked, as you know. And gentrification has been happening in many neighborhoods, and yes, in Southeast Raleigh and along New Bern Avenue. And we don't even have BRT. We don't even have the funding yet. It has already been happening. Doesn't make it right, but what we should be doing is using the experience of other cities and looking for ways to actually mitigate these problems, which is in part why I just saw in the presentation on equitable development addressing some of the very things that you're bringing up. And I agree with you. We should be talking about how are we going to prevent predatory developers from taking advantage of people. Absolutely, we should be doing something about that. We should be thinking ahead about how we're going to address businesses that will be affected from the construction and increasing rents. We absolutely should be doing that. And nobody has been speaking more loudly about the need for addressing affordable housing on this transit authority than me.
What is the
For years.
average income when we talk about affordable housing? Karen,
And what do you mean by that?
when we say affordable housing, what's the income that we're talking about for affordable housing?
There's a whole range.
So tell me one of the ranges, Karen. Since you've been a loud voice, like you said, for affordable housing, so I feel like you would know. What's the average income when we talk about affordable
Be
housing?
anywhere from 0 up to 80% of average median income.
No, 0 up to a certain percentage is low-income housing. So I'm asking you, what is the average
Affordable
for
housing is
affordable
anywhere
housing?
from 0 to 30%,
So, okay,
40 to 60%, and 60 to 80% of
There's a
AMI.
low-income housing, and then there's affordable housing. Low-income housing is from 0 to about $30,000, $40,000 a year. Then, actually, it's a little higher than that now. And then affordable housing is people who make more than the people who are riding the bus our ridership makes for affordable housing. And we talk about developers and their development, they're not putting a lot of affordable housing in the new development. And when we talk about economic opportunity, home ownership is the cornerstone of economic wealth building and opportunity for anybody, and especially in the African American community. So when your home is being snatched from you, who is being benefited from this economic opportunity? People who can get to work and make a minimum wage job, or people who already had a staple to build wealth and now it's been taken from them because of development, and because that development is saying it's going to follow the path of the BRT. And you're right, gentrification is already happening, and it's going to happen even more rapid with development assistance, since they said out of their mouth that they're going to follow the path of the BRT. And when you speak on what was voted on in District C, historically, at most 6 to 8, sometimes 10% of the residents in District C come vote. So I don't want to paint the picture that District C voted for this and let 6% of the residents speak for the majority. And when we talk about the ballot and how it was written for the Wake County Transit Plan, the tactics used in that was similar to the tactics that Nathan used when he called different members of the authority to say, we just want to move transit forward, giving people just enough information to agree with you, to vote with you, to their own demise. As we push this bus up New Bern Avenue, it will irrevocably damage the community that's up in New Bern Avenue that's been there for generations. As we push this bus up New Bern Avenue right now, I am not opposed to bus rapid transit. I am not opposed to bus rapid transit on the New Bern Avenue corridor. I am opposed to the New Bern Avenue corridor being the guinea pigs to this test, to figure out how economic development around transit will affect people once we've moved them out. And if we're talking about our revenue, and if we're talking about the growth of transportation, why would we move out the people who ride our bus and in the long run hurt our ridership? Our ridership will decrease as we move the people who live there out. And we talk about what's going on across the country. You're absolutely right, Karen. Gentrification is happening across the country. And I just gave you all some information about how public transportation is working in some measure in conjunction to that, whether willingly, willfully, intentionally, or not. And when we talk about us voting for this, I agree. We all voted for this. We were very, very focused on transit, moving transit forward, like Nathan said when he called people. But we weren't thinking about how all these pieces work together. We weren't thinking about how transit works with housing. We weren't thinking about how transit works with planning. We weren't thinking about how transit is going to affect other people after that. And if we're saying economic development and if our main focus should be our ridership. We're a public transportation company. Ridership should be the focus. And if 10 years, 5 years from now, our ridership decreases because we're hoping that people move in who would rather walk or drive their cars once we've moved the people out who actually ride the bus and live in that area, then what are we really focused on when we say ridership? And isn't the purpose of transportation mobility? And isn't the purpose of enhanced transportation improved mobility? And if it is, then why is improving mobility low ranked in this FTA report? But development is medium high. Why is that if our focus is our ridership? Why is that the case? My goal is not, like I said, I'm not here saying that we don't need to have enhanced transportation. I am here saying that it needs to be equitable. And having an EDAT study that's happening and where they're figuring things out while at the same time that they're moving people out, seems like that EDAT is there to make it seem like we're doing our part when we're really not. You can speak to a lot of different people around this country, and they'll actually, in high political positions, who would actually say the same thing I'm saying, who would actually agree with me, because it's the truth. Now, we can have cognitive dissonance or blissful ignorance and pretend like we don't see what's going on and we don't see how these parts match to each other. But if we're worried about ridership, then why would we move them out? And we're understanding that this is a part of that.
I have an observation, if I could. I think a lot of good points have been raised. We're working in a number of cities and communities across the country. What I hear almost universally is, and particularly with underserved communities, is the need for better access to transit. Because it's a little ironic to me that and although I understand the points you're making. The second point is development, gentrification, rising property values, whatever words you want to use, it is happening. So for me, the only question is what kind of development are we going to see? Are we going to continue to see car-centric development? Are we going to see development that will support better transit for everybody? So that's just a question I put out there. I believe we should be building a more transit, pedestrian, bicycle-oriented city. That's my belief. That's the kind of future I would like to see for Raleigh. But I guess the bigger question here is, and you're questioning the timing and the sequencing and why New Bern first. And there were some technical reasons, some procedural reasons. You're questioning, have the equity issues been properly considered and addressed? Is there time to address it with this being the first rollout? That's how I'm understanding what you're saying. So I don't know that we could really explore that in the context of this meeting sufficiently, but I have a question, and I know that City Council is very much aware of this and discussing it, and they're having meetings about equitable development. Would it be possible to get some sort of report out as to the status of that and how this might be being looked at presently?
Yeah, so we can,
They're looking at the equitable development around transit, and I know they're meeting about it and discussing it.
yeah, so there was an update on Monday of this week. We got that out to the board, and it was on just a basic update on transit and the equitable development around transit process, and the development of policy initiatives that could be. It's really a toolkit of policies addressing pretty much everything that's talked about today, as well as many other things, because we're in a fast growth county, city, and region. So the short answer is that that's online, that presentation, if you want something immediate that kind of gives an outline of where we are, as well as I'll be happy to bring anyone to a future meeting or to a special meeting to present on the status of EDAT, as well as other initiatives with affordable housing, which is certainly a part of EDAT, but specifically if the board so chooses. So certainly let me know your direction, and I'm sure that we can coordinate that for you.
Thank you. I also want to, as I wrap up what I have to say that's on my heart about this, I will be sharing with the authority just a couple pieces of information. I'm not sure if anybody has done their own specific personal research on gentrification in North Carolina, how transit is affecting it, but we have a lot of information. I have a lot of information in regards to that, like the risk of gentrification in North Carolina, including different studies, articles that were published by the News and Observer that was talking about will gentrification, more gentrification, city wants equitable development, but will more gentrification spur that? Also articles written about the mass gentrification that's going on in Raleigh. This was also by the News and Observer, Southeast Raleigh gentrification, is it bad? It actually talked about what's actually going on, the houses being taken. There was even a news report done on MSNBC on how rapidly Raleigh is gentrifying. I think that if we know that gentrification is happening, everybody here has said it, and it may be something that we can't personally stop here. The point is for it to be equitable. It should be, if gentrification is going to happen in Raleigh, it should happen with justice. It should be made sure that that our residents and our current ridership are protected, not moved out. It's smart for Go Raleigh to consider that because we're going to lose money in the long run.
Well,
and if we're
we
saying,
don't even want to charge the riders now.
and we have some riders we can't even charge, and we're saying increasing a better transportation, a better bus route does not mean creating special lanes for it, creating buses to ride for it, creating an environment where developers will then become even more predatory. I know a lot of time has been put into this, and I'm sure we know here, whether we admit it or not, all of us understand politics, and we know how it works. And we know in politics you got to make deals with the devil. We know in politics you got to say one thing and mean another. And in some measure, we're up here functioning as volunteer politicians in some measure. And we're making decisions that are affecting people's lives and livelihood, not some image in the sky. It's more than a notion of economic development and growing things and who's going to get that benefit. But even if we look historically around what's happened to African American communities, even when things were brought in telling them that this is going to work for you, this is going to help you, we know it has not. That's historic. Anybody saying that that's not the case is lying to themselves. And we're all intelligent people up here. So it's my position that I do not support the Wake County Transit Plan as written. It's my position that we need to make sure that before we make any movements to do anything, that we fully understand how it's going to affect the people who live around our corridors, not just New Bern, but all of our corridors. It's my position that if we're going to do this, the most vulnerable, our citizens, shouldn't be the guinea pigs of this. If we don't get funding to go up Capitol, if we don't get funding to go up Western, if there's no justification for it, which sounds like there really isn't, then we would have damaged a community in the long run and drive up the street 10 years, 5 years from now and not even recognize it, and not even recognize the people that were there, and not even recognize the culture that made that community. And if we sit by and not only let it happen, but be complicit in it happening, then who are we?
I would just point out similar things are happening in Oberlin Village, have happened completely without transit. And so, in my mind, they are related, but these things are happening already.
That's all I have to say.
Before I make a motion that we table this discussion until we get more facts on the matter, it is ironic that the development community, Kane and others that are doing a lot of heavy development, Michael and I had this conversation earlier, they're putting just as many parking spots in now as they were 5 years ago. We are building for a suburban market in our inner city. So unless unless the occupants, the people that are moving in to the density development can walk to where they're gonna do their live, work, or play deal, they're gonna have a car. They're not gonna get on a bus. They aren't getting on a bus now. So I just want us to remember that for all this conversation that Karen and Spencer, anyway, Nathan is talking about, it's not happening. It's just, it's not there yet, and,
There are discussions happening, such as reducing parking minimums.
UDO has reduced
and things
parking
like that. I mean,
requirements in downtown.
But it is an evolutionary thing, and I agree with you. Right now, the market that drives lending for commercial developments, even if the city didn't require it, lenders would probably look at the market and say, yeah, you need to provide parking. But we're moving in the right direction. We're taking baby steps, not as quickly as we probably could be, but, not having a really viable, attractive transit alternative is impeding that. So the sooner we get there, the better we're going to get to the kind of development you're talking about.
but look at the human capital. That's what Tulupe
Oh,
has discussed with us today.
I understand.
It's the human capital. Bring this thing, okay. We could talk about this the rest of the evening.
I agree, we should
And,
table it
Yeah,
till it.
I'm definitely
So
okay to
I
table
think we
this.
need to table it, but the advocates for this position, either position, will do what they have to do to further to further what they want to get done. And that's what's so great about this country, is that we do have access to influence public policy decisions, whether here, in the streets, lobbying in Washington, whatever the case may be. And James West used to call that creative tensioning. He still calls it creative tensioning. And when that creative tensioning is done right, then hopefully the best results are obtained. But without that creative tensioning, you stand a chance of something not worth coming to fruition. I move that we table the discussion.
Before we do, I do want to say this. I do appreciate everything that's been said here, and I did meet with Nathan and also with Tulupe and heard, both sides of, if it is two sides to this, and I'm thinking we're all somewhat going down the same road. We want to see the city grow. We want to see things happen. There was a very strong statement that was made when it said gentrification with justice. And I think bringing that out, we need to understand that there are people involved. And so we need to, think about things when we do it deeper than just transit. And I think that's what she's saying. It's not that we don't want this. It's not that you don't want to see the city grow. It's not that you don't want to see. But a lot of things that was explained of why we're doing what we're doing, why we're going where we're going, is about bike lanes. It's about those things. And it's not about the person. And so I think we need to think about sometime gentrification with justice. How can we think about everybody, in this thing? Everybody's not going to be satisfied. Everybody's not going to be protected. But at least as a board, what we want to do is consciously think about that. And I think her bringing that to the forefront, it's not trying to stop anything, and that's not what it is, but just want the answers. And I think as a good board, we should have answers. If somebody have questions, we should answer those. And so, as she said, 10, 15 years from now, when we look back in our community, we can say, I had a part of doing something good, instead of saying, what have we done, without answering everybody's question.
Amen.
Amen. That's true. Ashe. All right, well, make a second that we table this conversation for a later meeting. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nay.
May I ask a question?
joking.
So, regarding the report out from the city council, you're recommending that we just go online and look at the presentation?
That is
Can it
correct.
be
I'll make
sent out
sure
to us?
that, I'm sorry?
Can it be sent out to us?
We'll send the link, yes, we'll just send the link. If I am 99% sure it's out there. If it's not, for some reason, we'll get with RTN and make sure that that it can be. Because I know it's probably being looped on RTN. I just got to make sure it's also available online. Let me do some homework, one way or another. I'll make sure that you get a link to that.
Thank you.
Well, David,
Yes,
that's
sir.
a group that's looking at EDAC, right?
That is the equitable development around transit. It's held 2 series of public meetings thus far, looking at really how will the areas around transit,
What I want
what type of,
Can we have a joint meeting together with them?
I mean, Jason Harden, yeah, he's the guy. So
City council
he's
guy?
with planning.
Well,
So,
I'm just saying, you know, a lot of questions we may have.
Yeah, Jason
that
will be,
we
yeah,
could,
he can
if they-
present.
Yeah.
Also,
if
there's,
we could have a
there are
joint
two,
meeting.
two opportunities coming up that we've been sent out for our calendars for 2 more public input sessions on
No, I'm not
on
talking
what
about
they're
a point
doing.
of public session. I'm saying 2 groups that have a common interest for the city meeting and having I'm not talking about bringing John Q. Public into the meeting. I'm talking about us and them sit down and make sure that we understand where they're coming from. So a lot of questions we have, they may have the answers if we just remove all these barriers that we've established between inter-board protocol.
I can get Jason to provide a presentation on all the work that's been done to date, and certainly I think that he would be very well positioned to answer any questions.
Danny, it's staff, it's not another board. It's not a board like we're a board, it's staff that have been collecting information, including input
Okay,
from
well,
the public.
us meet with staff. You know, that's a nuance that doesn't rise to the level that I would like for it to rise to address the issues that we have in front of us.
Yeah, I think that certainly, again, Jason can provide really good background on that process and answer any questions. If there's anything pending, we can certainly come back
So
again.
before he comes to us, then tell him to give us a crib notes on what they're doing so we can look at it, and then we'll be better prepared to ask him questions.
That'll be fine.
Okay.
Thank you. All right,
And
moving-
I say, Jason, I'm 99% sure that he'll be the best guy, but, you know, I'll certainly report back out in the email to the board, if not tomorrow, very first of next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the first item on the agenda, Route Committee.
All right. So Route met, we discussed a number of changes that are going on. I'm not going to hit the FY21 because that's going to be presented to us later. However, the 11L, just a quick update, we're due to 440 widening. That's the 11L is going to be shorted because of the bridge being out. That's something that we're letting riders know about. I asked for a update on the shelters. So there's a ton of shelters being planned out. I can they're more than happy to present that to us. But what we had was just a printout of how many are going forward, and then BRT. There's an update. The RFP is out right now. They are narrowing down who will handle that in terms of companies. I had asked for an update on whether engagement had been part of that piece and whether there had been some discussion about the need to be able to connect, because that's been something that's been talked about in marketing quite a bit. I know, Karen, did you have a comment with regards to that you wanted to bring forward currently, or on engagement with the RFP, or do you want to? Is that an ad hoc issue?
Are you talking about my suggestion that we ask for a specific budget item for the FY21?
Oh, I'm
Or
sorry.
plan
That was
request?
FY21. Yeah, I'm sorry. There was a presentation that the folks who were responding, companies that were responding to the RFP, were mandatory to talk to regarding presenting some public involvement and engagement pieces. And then the last one was RFI for the ECAB as an update. We are waiting on that. That's with regards to the R line. We're waiting for some other pieces to move forward. So especially with our next move on the R line service changes and whatnot. So it was a entertaining meeting, but otherwise just updates.
Awesome. Are they going to present on there?
I'm sorry?
Are they presenting on any of these?
No. We don't need,
Okay.
unless we need
No.
to present to us.
That's perfect. All right. Thank you for that. Are there any questions to the route committee for any of the things that Nathan presented? Awesome. All right, finance and policy.
We met last week, and we had full attendance, and Madam Chair was with us as well. The first item was the R-line service changes. I had in December asked that it be referred back to that committee. I had some questions about the equity analysis. Those questions were answered to my satisfaction. Then at the last meeting, some of the members had not had a chance to review it, and they requested to have it redistributed. Our recommendation would be to approve it unless other members had any other questions about it.
Does any other members have any questions about the R-line service changes? Okay. Would you like to make the motion?
I would move to.
No, I'm ready.
I'd move to approve it.
Second. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. the
And
ayes
just
have
for
it.
clarification, the body did approve the R-line changes earlier. This is for the service equity
Service equity
analysis,
analysis
which
only.
was done in conjunction with that service change.
Okay.
Just for the minutes, just to make sure that
Right, the
we were
service
clear
equity
on that.
analysis. I apologize for that.
Thank you
Yes,
for clarifying that. The next item is, it's a very long name. It's a Coordinated Human Service Public Transportation Plan. This was something prepared by staff, and Morgan presented it to the committee at the last meeting. And we voted to endorse it. And Morgan, do you want to give a brief summary of that for the other members?
I'm sorry, Mr. Stevenson, did you want to do something with item B? Did you need any staff?
I
support
was
on that?
I was going to go back to it. Item B. Yes. But David, item B on our agenda or item B on the committee?
I'm sorry, item BB.
What is BB?
What is BB?
2BB. I didn't know if the
BB.
Community Human Service Transportation Plan, if you needed any support.
No, I've asked Morgan to give a brief
Yeah,
overview
she's about to do that now.
because
Thank you.
I don't have the
I got you.
wherewithal to do that.
Yeah, it is.
Doesn't need to be long, just give a snapshot of what it is.
All right, I'm just gonna wing it. Okay, so, what the Human Service Coordinating Plan is, it's basically a federal required document that our MPO led in developing in order to identify how we're handling mobility issues.
I couldn't quite hear you.
Sorry, Siri.
Can you speak up?
But basically, it's a federally required document, and so this is something that our MPO led, CAMPO led, and so all of the partners from transit systems to our ADA organizations that help to facilitate a lot of our human service trips, our ADA trips, not necessarily just transit providers or transportation providers, but more so nonprofit organizations that are helping individuals that are disabled, elderly, or low income. So this particular document does have an impact on our 5310 funding, which is something that we oversee as a system. However, with the changes that you see in front of you, or the changes that were brought to the board, they were minimal at best. What they did was they added some additional language to provide a little bit of clarity on the mobility coordinating committees. So you have so many acronyms, but which is the organization with the committee that CAMPO leads, that pretty much helps to develop this particular type of document. But it's also been a big part of identifying how do we move forward in addressing mobility issues throughout the county as it relates to ADA service trips. In addition to that, adding some more language about that, they also spoke on just changing the name to public transit versus what it is now. And that's just to be in compliance with how it is listed in federal guidance. And then the last portion of it that was changed dealt with just the mobility management coordination that they're kind of moving up from tier 2 to tier 1. And that's gonna mostly affect how they're moving forward and developing strategies and plans that impact our rural areas of Wake County and how we're going to be addressing human service issues within those areas. So all in all these changes are pretty minimal. We did endorse the updated version of this document last April. So what we're just saying that, that what's being recommended this time around is not something that's going to directly impact us. So, yes.
What does MCC stand for?
Mobility Coordinating Committee.
Okay.
It only takes 20 years to figure all this stuff out.
Sorry, I'm out of breath.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Morgan?
Yeah, thank you, Morgan.
So beyond the committee endorsed it, does this body need to take action on that?
It's an action item.
We would like the adoption of that as part of the adoption approval process. It would be important for you to show endorsement or adoption of that document.
I move to adopt it.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, the next item is the pending item for the budget.
And if I could, my apologies. Item A, R-line. It was brought to my attention, and so my apologies, that we had not actually approved the R-line routing itself, that we do not have that in the minutes as a formal action to take out for our implementation, and we would follow a normal implementation schedule for that, notification of riders and of those residents that would be in close proximity to the route, as well as general information to all of the city of Raleigh and riders of that service. Again, that was not on your agenda. That's my fault. And if you would like to tell us to move forward, we'll be happy to. But if you would like for us to come back at a future meeting, the next meeting, because we would like to get this underway as soon as we can provide you again with a summary of where we are and where we're headed.
So what's the, what's the committee's, because this all came from Route.
Well, this came from Route. Route put it out with recommendation to move forward. It then went over to Finance and Policy to look at the equity issues, and I believe Finance and Policy recommended to move forward. Is that correct?
Yes, we approved the equity analysis.
So does that then bring us to where, if we make a motion, I'm just curious, I don't mean to step out of my zone here, but does that mean we can make a motion from this body and it makes sense?
Yes. So yeah, you're gonna poke me.
See, I don't feel bad about not knowing anything, because I watched these two guys and they.
So, Route Committee approved the change of the R line that has been discussed over the last year. It came to the full board in, I believe it was January.
December or January, one of them.
Mr. Stevenson requested that it be referred to finance to be discussed further.
I remember that.
We discussed it in finance. We discussed the Title VI report that we just voted on and approved. So the R-line service changes, since they were referred to finance and policy, need to come back, coming back out of finance and policy. They voted to bring it back to the full board. So both the Title VI report and the service changes were coming back to the board this month. We inadvertently put it all on one line on your agenda. We should have, in fact, had that on two separate lines. I think that's what caused the confusion. So the Title VI has been approved just now. Now the R-line service changes could be considered.
And all of the public engagement, stakeholder engagement, that's all completed, correct?
That's all we've done. You had the public hearing in December.
Okay. So we're ready to move ahead with
We
implement.
reviewed all the comments, so it's, you just had that one final question about the equity. That was taken care of. So it's now come back out of finance and policy to the full board for consideration on this actual service changes.
Do we need to make a motion to adjust the agenda to cover this?
No, if you would like to approve the service change, then that would give us that motion in the minutes, and we'll start with implementation.
Okay, so, any Somebody
I
wanna-
move to approve.
Second.
All right. Ms.
Question. I just would like to make a motion to put it into the agenda, just in case somebody looks back at it later on and say we acted upon something that was not on the agenda. I mean, you just said that it was an omission, unintentional, but an omission. And we can easily say we amend the agenda to include the omission, and then we can vote on it.
All
I'm
right.
just a little procedural piece of,
I mean, just to keep it
Wizardry
clean.
there.
We can do that.
You want to make the motion then?
certainly, so moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
We're this adding it to the agenda, or is this
Just
the
adding it
outline?
to the agenda.
Okay, aye.
We're making a motion to, can you make the full?
I make a motion that we amend the agenda so that the BA will have, and there'll be a new B, R line changes relative to what,
The route change.
route changes. So we've already approved Title VI changes, and now that we have a new B, which will be the route changes that came out of, and really that should be up in the route committee itself, and move it up into the route committee, because it came out with an approval from the route committee, and then we're clean, right? Isn't that clean?
We can make that work, yes.
Yeah.
Our
okay.
line route changes being moved to the route committee.
Right.
Line, and making a motion that we approve the changes for the route. Is there a second to the motion?
Does it make sense?
That's
Just,
good.
being
I second
nitpicky.
it. So it's been moved and properly second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On to the next item, then would be the pending budget.
Staff presented the draft 2021 fiscal year budget and gave an overview of it. And it was for information only. And there was no action taken. They're going to bring it back in a further iteration at the next meeting, and then it'll be brought to the board when it's completed. There's really no action there.
Michael, I have a comment that I'd like to make on
Sure.
the budget. Currently, public comment is open for the FY21 budget request until, I believe, the 29th. And and as a body that could, I guess, make public comment on our own budget recommendation to the FY21 budget that'll go to the TPAC. I would like to, and this was has been discussed by some. I've talked a little bit with David Eatman about this, and with, but one of the topics that continues to come up in the marketing committee and even at this board is the need for stronger outreach in the community around bus rapid transit, to ensure that we're getting a wide variety of members of the community who are really engaged in this conversation as we're moving forward and developing these plans. And so I would like to make a recommendation that Go Raleigh request funding for one full-time staff person that would be dedicated solely to civic outreach, civic engagement around bus rapid transit, moving forward for the next, 7 years till the transit plan is implemented. And the reason I'm requesting that is I know that our Go Raleigh staff, both in terms of our marketing staff and our planning staff, they're already doing this to a certain extent. Also, there are folks from the planning department that are involved in civic outreach. But in my observation, all of these folks have a lot to do and are in terms of the planning and marketing and outreach in other ways. And this project is so new, it's such a new technology. I think we really need to ramp up how much we really communicate and engage with the community. Go Raleigh is the project sponsor for Bus Rapid Transit, not Go Triangle. Go Triangle have more staff involved in doing community outreach. which they were using a lot around light rail and whatever else they'll be doing in the future. But since these are our projects, Raleigh houses it, I think it would benefit the project and would benefit our current staff to have someone really designated to being creative in really engaging people one-on-one and not just going through the traditional things we have done with postcards and press releases, but going beyond that. I think it's really going to involve somebody on the ground really interacting with people and communicating one-on-one, making sure that we're meeting with all the right community groups. And also given the fact that the current city council has decided to do away with the current citizen advisory council, and they are working towards some other plan for civic engagement, which I understand could potentially be an office of civic engagement. I think all the more reason we could use some more help right now. And also, this person could potentially be and should be sort of more integrated into a broader civic engagement strategy for the city, but this one will be dedicated just to bus rapid transit. So that my recommendation is that we make that request. I don't know how much that would be. It depends upon whatever that is you would assume would be the appropriate funding level for staff level of that position. And I also think that it would have merit with all the other municipalities that vote on the budget, because bus rapid transit doesn't just affect Raleigh, it affects Garner and it affects Cary and beyond. If eventually this goes to Nightdale or Wake Forest or whatever. So I think and also I will say that I've certainly heard at the last city council work session remarks from Mayor Baldwin that she'd like to see more creative engagement with the community to make sure we're really reaching more and more people. So, Dan, do you have a question?
Question. Right now, we have 160% increase, and I reckon that comes under the Go Triangle's implementation of the Wake Transit program, more or less, right? That position would go in that pot of money.
I'm not quite understanding the question. My apologies.
Well, I would like to hear, I don't knock the position, but I would like to know, can you not sharpen your pencil and take it out of the current budget that you already have? I mean, you have your projected budget, your 2001 budget is 110, 20 was 53,000. You have a 105% increase in that budget.
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
I know I'm ahead of you because I got it.
What is
The budget.
The budget.
what page is that in the page number in
Talk to
the?
Michael.
It, well, it's the second page.
It's our handout that we had earlier.
Yes.
Is there any way I can?
Well,
I
I don't have
can't
it
respond to
either.
that. I can't say that our budget has a lot of extra cash in it, quite honestly.
I'm just saying, maybe
so-
before we vote on this, maybe
Yeah.
we need to have.
Well, there's certainly no guarantees that it would be funded. This is a request that it's my understanding that this is a request that we take the request through public comment period to the TPAC. Certainly we can do that, and we can make sure that we right-size that budget for a position that would be comparable to existing positions within the city and with Go Triangle, so that we, have something that is comparable to not only the city, but probably our peers. We would just want to make sure there's some equity there. And then we would bring that back as information to the body, but we would be submitting that to TPAC as a budget request or as a amendment, is my understanding. It's just as part of public comment that would be you think, or the body thinks, if you so choose, that would be a valuable resource. So from a staff perspective, we'll be happy to carry that forward. But as far as taking that from existing resources, I don't. Especially when it comes to personnel, that's not possible.
Well, from someone who had a 74% increase in his property evaluation and is looking at if you use the formula, a 51% increase in my property taxes, I would like to be a part of a board that does try to act like we care about those
and I
people
do
out
as
there.
well. And I'm not
Sticking it to 'em.
And the TPAC may say that there is no money to fund it. So like I say, I'm not sure where that would be
I just want
going.
the record to reflect that somebody
Yes,
on
sir.
this board is kind of looking at that
And
stuff.
I'm not sure exactly. Again, I wish I could see the numbers that you're referring to, but
Well, there it is. I just saw it.
All right.
Got it for Michael.
So the request was to make a budget request to add a full-time person,
Right.
not only for next year, but for the coming years, as
7
long
years.
as
Although I guess it's really, these budgets are once a
they're
year.
year by year.
So-
So, David,
And Danny, part of the reason I'm suggesting this is because of the comments I've heard at this table about the need,
I'm
you know,
not
for
saying that
better
the need is not
civic
necessary.
engagement.
I'm just saying that if we keep funding everything we talk about, and we keep, and people end up still having to pay more taxes, it just gets to a point.
This
that's
is not a
gonna be
tax
tipping point.
increase. We already have the funding through the half-cent sales tax. There's no tax increase
Right, but
associated
anyway, I
with
said
it.
my part.
Yeah.
So-
And plus, our committee needs to approve it, right?
well, that's my question. So this has to go to TPAC, is what you're explaining.
That's
Does it need to go to Finance and Policy Committee to make a formal request, or is it this just going to go as a public comment?
As a body, if you so choose, as a body to move that forward, again, we would develop a appropriate request for signature by the body, the chair, if she chooses, and then we would present that during the public comment period as a formal comment. Again, that would be a statement from this body that that resource is requested. It would have to, as many special requests come through public comment period, it would be taken with all of those, and the body would then determine which of those would have the opportunity to be funded in '21. Historically, there have been changes made to the budgets that come out of preliminary budget and final budget. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying there is process there, depending upon resources.
You know, because that community engagement person could be cross-pollinated with you, because you're doing a lot of stuff across different departments already. So that doesn't necessarily have to come out of this budget, but the position could still be funded, dedicated to this, your office.
As a side motion, what you can do is, if you would like to just refer that item to, this is just an idea. If you would want to refer that item to finance, I mean, we can see if there's other creative avenues to follow that may not be, so we'll continue to follow this path, but we'll also make sure that if there's any other opportunities out there, that we've reviewed those as well.
I think the only concern was, does something need to happen before the public comment period closes? So
No, we would just make sure that that request moves forward from the body.
So I would think that rather than this just going into the general, if the RTA wanted to endorse this, which we haven't had any discussion, I would think and I would hope that that would give it extra weight along with all the other public comments, and that we would have an opportunity as a body to influence the budget before we move it along. But I'd be happy if we wanted to talk about this at finance or wanted to talk it at marketing committee. Those seem like the most appropriate ones. Maybe we don't have to do both, but
At a minimum, what we can
Or-
provide at a staff level is
Yeah.
what would the budget for something like that or a comparable,
That would be
you
that
know
would
what I
be
mean,
helpful.
would that budget be? So at a minimum, we can do that.
My understanding from sitting in these 3-hour meetings with TPAC is that amendments can be made at any point. So we're not necessarily under a rush to get it in by the 29th, but we could actually discuss it and fully fledge it before we ask. Is that correct?
I think that it's good for things to be part of that public participation process, through the 29th. Again, we can make sure that we provide the appropriate documentation to carry that forward if so directed by the board. But you are correct. There are ways that that can occur outside of that process. Certainly, everybody likes to have process in place, and this is the process in order for this type of request to occur.
All right. The next item.
Well, I guess we need to, I would appreciate a decision on what our next steps are. If we're going to, should we send it to one of our committees? Or
So
should we vote on it right now? Or do
I
we need more
suggest that we
comment?
do send it to one of our committees to be further fleshed out. I think that the committee for it. It does sound like marketing would be the committee for this, since it would be a person that's for outreach, but we do need to
Budget goes
understand how
under.
it fits in the budget. So can we send this to, maybe split the baby in two and send part of it to finance to figure out where it fits in the budget, and send the other part to marketing to figure out what the role would actually be and what they would be needed for?
That's fine. And I would maybe broaden it a bit, is that what's the most effective way to do it? Is it hiring a full-time person, or is it enhancing the role of consultants or something else? So, but I do agree with the need.
I agree with the need also.
Yeah. Well, I would prefer to just do it at one committee, just so we don't have to
Okay,
go to
then
both committee meetings.
fine with-
So I think that policy and finance
Okay.
And that's
would be
fine.
the committee for it.
So if you can put it on that agenda, and I'll be happy to come.
Yeah, and then we can kind of flesh out the other needs for it at that
That's fine.
agenda. Do we need to make a motion for that, or we're good?
I don't think so.
Brenda, are you saying
Just to refer it to committee?
Just to refer it to committee?
Usually if you
Finance.
refer, there is a body, as a body, you usually do refer items with a
Okay.
vote.
That's what we're doing. All right, so moving on to the bylaws.
We had anticipated to bring to this meeting the draft of the bylaws, but we had a really great discussion in our Finance and Policy Committee that we didn't get done. So we got about 3/4 there, and we're going to have one more committee meeting to get to the end, and then we'll bring back the draft in the March meeting. So I think it's been a very fruitful discussion. Yes. And we'll have a really good review of it at the next meeting.
Will that include the potential of changing the Raleigh Transit Authority's name?
Yes, and we've gotten there was confusion. We were told that it had been officially changed. We found out that's not the case. Yes, we do need to finalize the name and make a formal request to City Council.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
So again, the body did not vote on moving that item to Finance and Policy. And again, as long as we have clear direction that that's what everybody wants, we will take the public engagement position to Finance and Policy in March. Again, I just wanted to bring that back just for full clarification.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
And that is it from Finance and Policy.
Yeah. All right, and we are moving on to Marketing Committee.
Before we get started, I had a quick question for staff, for Andrea. Do we have, by chance, or the ability to show folks the images of the ad campaign on PowerPoint or? Thanks. Well, and while Andrea's doing that, I will tell you what the main topic of our conversation of our meeting at the last marketing committee meeting was about an ad campaign that Andrea has taken the lead on in developing, really at the urging of our marketing committee in past months, which is that we would really like to see some type of ad campaign or marketing campaign that is really geared towards, in general, building ridership across the region, and one that would also not just be encouraging people to use our bus services, but informing them about improvements that have been made in the last 2 years of increased coverage with new routes, and also increased frequency that we have also implemented on some of our routes. So Andrea developed some really beautiful ads geared towards different targeted populations and also different targeted media outlets. And she has been working with a variety of news outlets, including the News and Observer, the Indie Week, the Carolinian, Que Pasa, Raleigh Magazine, and I think we also talked about the possibility of the Triangle Business Journal as places to place a variety of 4 ads, which each have a unique message, and that's why I wanted to show them to you, if possible. And they each have some text that basically say the same thing, which highlights that we have bus service that's now going more places and coming more frequently. So the ads have started running, and they're going to continue to run through the rest of the calendar year. And the total cost of the ad campaign is going to be about $100,000.
So let me make clarification. We have not executed that completely, but if you implemented everything identified through that period that could be done, that would be correct.
Right, we haven't spent all the money yet.
That is correct.
Yeah,
So what I'm
yeah.
saying is we
That's the
identified a
plan.
number of resources where we could advertise that, and that would be that. So I didn't want somebody to think that was a single effort,
Okay.
just for clarification.
But I also want to mention the ads are, I think, really intended to be bright and to be fun and a little funny to kind of grab people's attention.
They're very beautiful ads.
So I did offer, following our review of the ads in the marketing committee, we thought that we suggested some minor text changes to clarify about frequency of bus and service change, and I sent those comments into staff in hopes that
And they
would be-
should be corrected before any additional effort is rolled out.
Great, thank you very much. And but they were, kind of small changes, but I think help clarify the message. And and I also, very important, I wanted to point out that the funds for this are not coming from the city of Raleigh, or from Raleigh funds. They directly, this is funds that we requested in the FY19 budget for the Wake Transit Plan. So it's the half-cent sales tax that is paying for these ads. Did I say that right, David? I hope.
That is correct.
Okay. So.
Yeah, we did also discuss that hopefully in the future that we would want to at least see the ads in the marketing committee meeting, have an opportunity to see them before they went live or went out. So just so that if we have any input to add to them on
Most
verbiage or
definitely.
anything.
The point well taken.
discussed that
Sometimes,
with
though,
Andrea.
when we have our budgets and we get going, unfortunately, that was a slip. So
So,
we'll
yeah.
certainly bring that back in the future.
Yeah, so we discussed that. And then in addition, the other item that we spent a fair amount of time on in the marketing committee was, given that we have some more upcoming public input sessions, both for the equitable development around transit and also for the western, or is it the southern BRT meetings coming up? Is it just southern or western or both?
So the meetings, which are coming up in February,
Yeah.
one in Raleigh, one in Garner, are for the Southern Corridor.
Southern, okay.
The Western Boulevard Corridor study is ongoing. While we don't have any particular dates for that, we also have equitable development around transit meetings coming up on a weekday and a Saturday.
Right.
If those haven't already been sent out, all of those dates to the board, we'll make sure that they get out tomorrow at the latest.
So, thank you. And so in any event, we spent a good bit of time just sort of brainstorming and asking questions of staff about different ways that we're letting the public know about these important meetings. And we encourage everyone to attend.
Thank you. Are there any other updates from the marketing committee?
I'm sorry.
Does that conclude our updates?
That's it, although I think Andrea did go to get the ads that we can see
I'm
them.
trying to pull them up.
So we
Is it
can,
possible we can just have them emailed?
Yeah, or
Well,
she
we can send them out to the
just
body.
Andrea, just email them to us at this point. Oh, you do? Right now? Okay, great.
yeah, we can send them out, though. It's up to you.
Do y'all want to see the ads?
We're just going to send them out via email.
We're just gonna email them. Thank you.
Well,
Marketing came out and I got a great Rosa Parks campaign too.
Yes.
Was very successful, and Go Raleigh Operations did all of that with us doing the graphic design for it as well.
I don't know if anyone saw those on the buses. They were like placards on the seats, sort of
Yeah.
seat reserved for Rosa Parks. I thought that was really
In
clever.
the front of the bus, spoke about it in the,
David, I omitted an
Marquee.
item from the finance and policy, if I could backtrack. At our meeting, Nathan had made a request that the Finance and Policy Committee consider the idea of distributing free bus passes to homeless shelters. And we did talk about it, and we all thought it was a worthy idea. So staff has agreed to do a bit of research and see how other peer systems are handling that and what's working and what's not working. So what I meant to report back on that, and I
That's
forgot
awesome.
it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And
That's a great
yes,
idea.
we should have put that under the pending item, so
Got
that
it.
was, we'll make sure that that hits the next committee meeting as well as a report out at the full body.
thank you. All right, we're almost. Did you have something?
going to adjourn?
No, I wanted to. We did not get a chance to do introductions, and I know we have a new authority member. You came in hot here on this, came in on a hot day with us, but I wanted to give him an opportunity to introduce himself, since he's like the new member to our slightly dysfunctional family.
Hello, my name's Joshua Gill. I live out in the West, and I'm the chairperson, or was the chairperson of West CAC until 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, I should say. I'm also on the Go Triangle Transit Advisory Council, and I work as a ICU nurse at Duke. So,
I'm sorry.
cardiac ICU nurse at Duke University Hospital.
Thank you. Welcome.
So we got someone here that if we have a heart attack, you can help us out, huh?
It can happen at any time.
Don't knock on wood, man, after that, because you and I, we're first on that.
Well, thank you, welcome. Oh, yes, Danny.
Okay. To your point earlier this evening, when you look at the year-over-year ridership comparison by route, and you look at the year in December over December, or whatever the computational period is, there has been a decrease in Biltmore Hills, which has been a predominantly African-American community, of 14.8%. Chavis Heights, 10.7%. Wake Med is down 0.3%. And I just want you know, and then at cumulative, we're only increasing a half of a percentage point. And however you want to measure the metrics that you're measuring ridership, we're basically at zero. We're not really increasing ridership currently, right? And we're, you know, the negative. It's page 117 in the backup.
That is true. I think that these are things to consider when we're talking
Right.
about the BRT.
This is to the point that Tallulah was making, that in our haste to grow, you know, we're pushing out, because we could be pushing out people that would, and we don't know where they're going, you know, what's happening to them.
It looks like Pool and Barrel is down 21.3%.
Yeah, this year to prior year, we're up just over 7%. That's in the prior year.
You mean
Again, we
ridership
can-
has increased 7%? Is that what you mean?
That's correct.
Right, but that's outside, that's, okay, all right, I'll leave it alone.
What year over year is it?
This is 90, this is December 19 over December 18.
Any place we have actually expanded
17.
our new bus service, where ridership is growing. And as we've increased frequency, ridership is growing. In fact, and we know from transit systems across the country and across the world, transit ridership increases with more frequency and reliable service. And so we can't expect major jumps in ridership yet because we haven't implemented that much. But where we have been implementing, ridership is increasing somewhat.
But we also need to be mindful of what we mean when we say transportation. And some of those places, the transportation they're adding that's increasing ridership are not buses. So, I mean, I
So-
get that we are where we are with buses. I mean, buses are where we're at, but it might be a little misleading to say transportation and increasing ridership when other places are putting in different forms of transportation and not just more buses. The trend is that people are moving away from riding buses. They're wanting something more convenient than a bus. They want to get on the light rail. They want something of that
Have you looked at
nature.
gentrification around light rail? It's nothing compared to BRT.
Oh, I am not at
I mean,
all.
it is,
I'm
it is
not
off the charts
advocating for
compared to
that either.
BRT.
I just want to be clear that
So-
that is not my advocation. I'm just clarifying what you were saying.
For real quick, though, if you look on the page 117, the first block of numbers is our base routes, which have not been touched by any other funding source. So they are Go Raleigh traditional routes, which do not have additional funding associated with the Wake Transit Plan. All of those routes combined, we're about 0.5% up in ridership. That's actually pretty good because we've seen a lot of other areas which are declining. If you look at our what we call somewhat recycled service, so that means that we've lowered headways, or we've combined routes, or we've done everything, other things. We've had a 61.8% increase in ridership associated with those routes that have been touched by the Wake Transit Plan in some way.
What
One of those that is most relevant is Martin Luther King Boulevard, which has seen an 80% ridership jump because we streamlined the route and we moved it to 15-minute headways. So, think about all of these things together. I mean, people will respond to frequency, reliability, and also you got to have good quality infrastructure and on-time service. So we're working on all of those elements combined. Again, if you have any questions regarding these numbers, let us know. They can be a little bit misleading or, because if you don't know exactly what they mean. And so we can actually set something up. We can do a quick presentation one day of exactly what's in the board packet and what each little section is referring to, if that would be helpful.
That is true, but I also don't want us to, I mean, that 7.1% number is also counting new routes that we just added that are 100.
That is true. That is true.
100%.
Yes.
So it's not our current routes.
And that's
that it's referring
that's
to.
a cumulative of everything together, which that also includes our contracted services, which are our suburban services out to Wendell, Zebulon, our services out to Wake Forest. While they're very important services to those communities, they're not going to draw the passengers per hour or the passengers per mile that our urban core services are. So it does get watered down when you look at everything from a holistic view. But when you look at the core city routes, we're doing pretty well.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other comments or conversations, I would like to wrap this meeting up. Time is it? If all hearts and minds are clear,
What's this right here
My-
for?
I'm not sure. If all hearts and minds are clear, I'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned at 5:20 p.m.